Hey everybody. Had a little mic trouble on this one. Sound quality is not going to be up to usual standard. Sorry. Alright, well, 10th Doctor's first outing. How'd he do? So, having caught all the way up on Doctor Who Series 2 with my overdue Doctor Who reviews, I thought I'd do something that I actually haven't done for old series. Really kind of, except for Series 1, and that was by default, which is to rank the individual episodes of the series. I did that like when Series 11 wrapped up, and like I said, I kind of ended up doing it for Series 1 because that was the only one for Eccleston, so when I ranked Ninth Doctor stories, that was the entirety of Series 1. But I've never really done it on these other ones before, and it was kind of interesting to work it out. Now, keep in mind that I count two-parters as one story, so even though there are 13 episodes altogether, this is effectively going to be a top 10 rank. I'm also leaving out Christmas Invasion. I don't like to try and integrate the specials into these sorts of lists. This is just sticking to the episodes that are considered Series 2. And before I get into the ranking, I want to say that boy, Series 2 was uneven as heck. Like, it has some very high points, but boy, there's a couple of real stinkers in this one, and then a fair amount of middle ground, which honestly, in some ways, did remind me of Series 11, which had a handful of episodes that I really liked, a couple I really couldn't stand, and then a lot kind of wavering in the middle. I will try not to draw too many comparisons, but I couldn't help but point out that one. So, let's start at the bottom. Number 10, Fear Her. Probably not the one a lot of people were expecting. I'm sure most people would have expected me to stick Love and Monsters at the bottom. It's the most hated, but the thing is, and I talked about this in my episode review, I can look at Love and Monsters and at least see the core of an idea that might have worked. Love and Monsters, I swear this is the last comparison I'll make to Series 11, is the Saranga conundrum of Series 2. There's just nothing here that's really any good. Nothing is building, like there's no part of this that I would have gone, oh, well, if they'd focused more on that, it would have been better. Like, none of this is any good. But at the same time, it's not good in a highly unmemorable way, which I think is why it doesn't show up in as many, like, worst episode lists as it probably should. Because it's not bad in a way that, like, abuses you as much. But, boy, this thing, it's really got nothing going on. Moving up one slot to number 9, it's No, it's not. It's Idiot's Lantern. And this one I didn't have a problem putting Fear Her at the bottom, but I did go back and forth. You know, what should be the next up from that, because there were a number of possibilities. The thing about Idiot's Lantern, especially going back and revisiting it, was catching a glimpse of a couple of things that were decent ideas and somehow getting more frustrated with the episode for spotting those and realizing the handful of things that were squandered by the mountains of stuff that doesn't work. But then having all that completely undercut by getting to the end and seeing what I had completely forgotten, which is Rose encouraging a young man to run to and support and be forgiving towards his abusive father who literally just stepped out of the house. No! I'm not going to redo my whole rant, but man, that really ticked me off. And even aside from that, the father as a character is cartoonish. I understand what the episode's trying to do with that portrayal, but it's cartoonish and I can't take it seriously. The Wire is an effective enough villain until we get to the home stretch where she stops being an intimidating version of the mother of the 50s housewife TV archetype and just starts going, "Feed me, hungry," over and over and over and over again, and then I friggin' don't care. Like, the couple of good things just get buried under the rest of this. So, going up from there, let's get the last really obvious bad episode out of the way. Love and Monsters. And yes, I did debate between this and Idiot's Lantern, but the difference is Idiot's Lantern actively pissed me off. Whereas Love and Monsters, it didn't. Love and Monsters is weird and bizarre and frustrating, but in an odd way kind of admirable because it's so different from almost anything else that Doctor Who ever does. You can kind of look at it as like okay, well that was an experiment. It didn't work, but you know, bless your heart for trying. And I can't give that much of a benefit of the doubt or, you know, a little semi-bit of a pass to, you know, Fear Her or the Idiot's Lantern. But yeah, Love and Monsters has got a lot going wrong. Tonally, it's kind of, the gear shifts of the tone don't really work, and but yet what it's sort of trying to say about fandom isn't a bad thing to base the episode around, but it's also not doing anything aside from that. It basically just is the allegory and then isn't really a story beyond that, and the characters aren't fleshed out, and it's clunky and it's weird and it's cringy, and I know it was designed by a kid, but the monster's embarrassing and just, no. It doesn't work. Okay, now that we've gotten the absolute dregs out of the way, now we get to kind of the white noise of the middle of Series 2, which is episodes that were not awful, but also, like, not much to write home about. Starting with number 7, Neuwirth. So, yeah. This is a really weak first proper outing, you know, in the series proper for the 10th Doctor. I don't think bringing back Cassandra was as enjoyable as Davies thought it was. I mean, like, she gets kind of a nice bittersweet note at the very end, but I'm not sure that by itself is worth bringing her back, which doesn't really bring much to the table otherwise. The cat nuns are just there, and like the whole plot is functional, but that's kind of just it. This is functional, but it doesn't feel like a proper new rollicking adventure. It's just like, oh, well, okay, so yeah, Future Hospital, cat nuns, got it. It's very bland overall, and it just doesn't leave much going for it, really. So going on from there, we get to number 6, which is an episode that I actually do enjoy, but it's got some clunky bits, which is Tooth and Claw. There's a handful of things that I do actually really like about this. I like hearing David Tennant's natural accent for a chunk of time. There's some pretty decent humor in here. The visual effects of the werewolf hasn't really aged very well, and it's debatable how good it was even at the time, but they try what they can to shoot around it most of the time by restricting it to shadows, you know, when they can. There are a couple of, like, hero shots of the thing that are like, nyeh. But, you know, what it has is it has a decent atmosphere. Actually, it has some really good music tracks in this one, but it's got a couple of highlights in the depiction of Queen Victoria. It's pretty good. So it's got little things that keep it fun, even as, you know, it's just kind of a somewhat rote monster in a period setting Doctor Who story. It gets the job done and it's fun enough. Alright, number 5, we have our first two-parter on the list, Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. This is one that I probably would have thought better of in years past, because at the first time I saw this, I didn't have other versions of the Cybermen to compare to. This was my introduction to them, and I thought they were pretty good. But now that I've gotten to know other takes on the Cybermen from Classic Who, from Big Finish, and then even later on down the line in New Who, different ways that they've been done, I really don't care for this version of the Cybermen too much. But setting aside my own wish for what the Cybermen were, and they just aren't, it's a decent enough story. It's kind of an interesting way to handle a parallel Earth story. Pete actually turns out to be a pretty dang good character. The villain is goofy and weird and laughable and monologues horrendously, but it does the job well enough. Mickey actually gets some surprising poignancy here, and it's fun. It's also, this is another one with a great music track. The theme music that is used for the Cybermen, I actually do really like. I think I like it better than Dalek music, if I'm being honest. So that's really good stuff, and it has a sense of fun and just a good amount of energy that helps kind of smooth over the rough patches a little bit. So, now we're going to get into the episodes that I think unequivocally really good stuff, and now I'm just ranking my preferences out of them. So, first up, at number 4, it's The Girl in the Fireplace. I suspect for a lot of people, this one probably would have been higher, would have been their number 2 or even their number 1, but I mentioned it in my review. I I like it. I enjoy it. I like the mechanisms of it. I like the pacing of it. I like the way it's told. For some reason, this one just doesn't have the emotional connection for me that it wants to have, and it seems to have for a lot of other people. So I don't know if it's just something about me, but for whatever reason, I don't quite connect emotionally with this one the way I think a lot of other people do. That said, it's still really good and really well done, and the what's going on with the villains is an interesting idea, and the relationship between Renette and the Doctor is really well realized. I do enjoy this episode quite a bit. It just doesn't have the emotional linking to me that I think a lot of other folks got out of it. So moving up to number 3, speaking of emotions, we get The Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. So the 2-part series finale. And yeah, this one also has some clunkiness to it, not dissimilar to something like, say, the previous 2-parter I mentioned with the Cybermen, but this one has really good emotional resonance for me, and that really does help me to be forgiving about things. And not to mention, I do just get into the raucous fun of Cybermen versus Daleks. Why wouldn't I want that? That's just a good time. So I'm digging all of that, and then, the emotional impact and everything going on with Rose and being separated from the Doctor, and honestly even just Jackie reuniting with Pete works really well for me too. So I was surprised that was kind of a new element for me. So I felt that while it's not narratively the best thing in the world, I do think it has a good strong emotional impact, and it leaves you feeling the way Russell T Davies wanted you to feel, and I think it's very successful on that front. Up towards the top 2, number 2, I'm going to put School Reunion. Now, I do have nitpicks about this, and I mentioned it before, especially as I've gotten to know Doctor Who as a franchise better. I'm increasingly skeptical of the way that they treated Sarah Jane. And I don't really love the implications that are kind of at play in terms of this idea that Sarah Jane kind of never really had much of a life that she was that impressed with after she left the Doctor. So it does have that baggage that I don't love, but if I look at the thing self-contained in and of itself, it's really good. Sarah Jane, even though she is a wonderful piece of nostalgia, even if you don't know who she is, because the first time I ever saw this episode I didn't, works really well. She's well sold for what she's doing and why she's there. Anthony Stewart Head is phenomenal as Mr. Finch. I really love him as a villain in this. K9's cute. Mickey has some great moments. The whole episode feels very Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it's not that I would ever want Doctor Who to feel like that overall full time, but like for kind of a one-off, bit of a lark, yeah, that's a lot of fun and pretty decent resonance in terms of like with things like Sarah Jane. So yeah, I like this one a lot, but it's not number 1, and I think you all knew what number 1 was going to be. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. I do love me some Beast. Yeah. I just about everything about this I love. I acknowledge some weird, goofy aspects to it, but they're short-lived and quickly forgotten in the wake of the astounding atmosphere of this thing, the great sense of tension, the wonderful sort of threat of the beast on both a visceral and an existential level, the really cool look for the Ood, the fantastic supporting cast, which, are playing all these characters and feel fully, properly fleshed out. The Doctor being sort of on the back foot because he does not know what he's dealing with, but the implications of what it might be are throwing him off and making him uncomfortable. It's just great. Top to bottom. I've always loved this 2-parter, but I can also safely now say it's my favorite story out of Series 2. Series 2 ranked. How would you rank it? Or what's your top? What's your bottom? What are your thoughts on my ranking? Whatever you think about any of this, just drop your thoughts down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Whole bunch of other stuff to do because there's buttons and links, including one to the Patreon, so you can check that out. Other links besides, P.O. Box address, etc. Check it out if you want to. If you don't, that's okay, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.